Thank you very much, and welcome everyone to the set webinar for the top 5 reasons you need a plan now around 2003. We've got a schedule that's chock full for you today, so buckle up your chin strap and get ready for a lot of good information. We've taken a little different approach here today. We're not talking a great deal about the risks and the compliance issues, but yet instead we're talking about the go forward and how you advance yourselves beyond where you are today using this 2003 event as a catalyst for doing so. So we have 4 companies presenting to you today. Myself from Champion Solutions Group. We've got also on the phone, we've got in order of appearance, we've got David Irwin from Blue Stripe. We've got Joseph Wright from AppZero, and we've got Eric Lustgarden from Apprenda. And with that, we'll dive right in. Just a real quick summary about Champion here. Bottom line is what you should know about Champion is we know infrastructure, we know how to optimize infrastructure, and we do so both on-premise and in the cloud. Pointing out the quote from our CEO, Chris Pyle here, we're changing the economics of the IT data center, and I think you'll agree at the end of the call today that we're being true to that vision and that credo. For our agenda today, we're going to talk a little bit about how things were in the year 2003, and then we're going to take you through a little journey about how to understand what you have currently, what your options are, then a little bit of a deeper dive to understand your inter-server dependencies and your multi-tiered applications. And we're going to talk about migrating applications, and specifically I want to point out that it is applications, not servers. So some pretty exciting stuff there from our friends at AppZero. And then finally we're going to close it with a Apprenda presentation on PaaS offering that they have, that it can do remarkable things with regard to changing your efficiency, responsiveness, and time to market for new application development, as well as optimizing your current infrastructure for certain applications, but more to come on that. So and we'll talk a little bit at the beginning and close at the end about a Microsoft funded assessment that'll help you get started on this journey. So with that, I've got a quote up on the screen, and this plays a little bit better in person, but anybody want to guess who said this? Kevin, want to take a guess?
I'm going to say it was Paul Sachs.
Well, actually it was me. It was just me just a couple of weeks ago, but we have a little fun with that. But in all sincerity, you know, this is a great opportunity to kind of recalibrate what you're doing, and we give you a lot of tools here for you to understand what you've got and what your next options are. We now have a poll question here that we want to put up for you. I promise we just have a few of these, and these will just be up for 30 seconds. So if you could take this poll question as it comes up, we would appreciate it. The poll question, as you can see, is how many Windows 2003 servers do you currently have in operation? Okay, let's move on then, and we really appreciate everyone who participated in that. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're back to the presentation. So a quick retrospective here. It's kind of fun to look at this and think about how things were in 2003 and how things probably were when your current 2003 infrastructure was built. So there were no smartphones, there was no iOS, no Android, no tablets, and no bring your own device. Server virtualization, shocking as this may seem, as mature as it seems today, was really in its infancy and typically recommended for only low intensity workloads. SAN was fairly new, quite expensive, and slow compared to where it is today. There was no cloud. A dual core processor was all the rage. Servers with 8 gigs of RAM were considered large, drives were much smaller than they are today, and fast Ethernet was considered fast at the time. Today we have even USB variants that are running at 5 gigabits. So the silver lining of Windows 2003, and this is really going to be the crux of our presentation today. As you upgrade, keep in mind that the end result should put you in a position to pay for that upgrade going forward. The complexity of your IT is reduced and security is enhanced. That really goes without saying on the security side. We all know that there will be no more patches released for 2003 server after July 14th of this year. As a result, you'll have a lot lower operating costs. And you know, we're going to talk a little bit about an assessment today, but we can tell you that of all the servers that we've assessed, and it runs in the thousands, we typically see 2 to 6% utilization on those servers. So generally there's a tremendous opportunity for server consolidation and cost reduction going forward. Elasticity, a really big thing that's available today that was not back in the day, and lots more on that in our presentation. And of course, you know, especially when we get to the Apprenda part of the presentation, you'll see some of these exponential changes that we're talking about in terms of elasticity and application time to market. Bottom line is, it's a very new day, and you can do a lot of wonderful things for your organization as you step away from Server 2003. So for the journey today, we're going to tell you how to understand what you currently have and your opportunities there. We're going to tell you how to map complex environment and multi-tiered applications. One of the things we know, a lot of our clients, you know, a lot of these things were installed years ago, and the knowledge about what connects to what and how and what is dependent on what and how is not always completely documented, or that documentation is not current. So we're going to, our friends from Blue Stripe are going to tell you how you can dynamically map that environment and know exactly what's talking to what, how, and how much, and how often. Then we're going to talk a little bit about migrating applications, and finally the platform as a service with Apprenda. So moving on, so just to kind of give a visual of what we're going to talk about today and what you can do with what we're talking about. The bar all the way on the left you see here shows the typical traditional data center, the amount utilized and the amount unutilized. And as we move across, you can see you know, cloud and virtualization, how that's helped, how you can further optimize it with some of the tools that we're talking about today, with Blue Stripe and AppZero and the Champion assessment methodology. And then for the workloads that you can move into the Apprenda paths, you can get to an optimized state that looks all the way like the bar all the way on the right. So pretty dramatic. I can tell you it's all quite real, and we're excited to bring this to you today. So this optimal application platform that you're looking at today is kind of our target for today, and we're going to start you through that journey right now. For Champion's role in this, we have an assessment process that's the beginning of this process. We run the Microsoft Assessment and Planning Toolkit. We use the PACE tool from AppZero, and that we use to get the application detail in your infrastructure. And I'm going to go through this quickly because we are going to circle back on this part of it at the very end of the presentation. We have our own proprietary tool that integrates the infrastructure information and the application information, and then we provide you a series of reports. These are just some snapshots from those reports that you can see here today. Probably the most differentiating one that you'll see is the one bottom left that actually categorizes all your applications in terms of their migration complexity. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, and Joey Wright may touch on that a little bit when he goes through his demonstration. The end result is a report. This is just a snippet of a report. that shows your servers, your applications, whether they're compatible with the cloud or not, whether they're compatible with 2012, their migration complexity, and presents a lot of opportunities for recombination and consolidation. Okay, and again, we will circle back on that at the end. So now we're going to move into the Blue Stripe part of the presentation. Blue Stripe is a multifaceted tool, but one of the things that we bring it to bear here is it is a great tool to be able to discover what's actually going on in your environment, to map that out graphically and dynamically. And with us today is Dave Irwin from Blue Stripe. He's going to take us through a demonstration of that tool.
Good, perfect. All right. So thank you, Paul. Again, like you said, my name is David Irwin. I'm a technical product manager here at Blue Stripe, and we're going to talk today about FactFinder and how we can help you through migration. So first, a bit of a background about Blue Stripe and who we are. Our name is Blue Stripe Software. We are a software company, not a consulting firm. So we just have really one product called FactFinder. What FactFinder is for is it's for automatically discovering and mapping distributed applications. So when I talk about applications, it's going to be a little different maybe than even in how Paul or Eric will talk about, or Joey, about applications. But when we say application at Blue Stripe, we're talking about distributed multi-tier applications. So I don't mean, for example, Oracle or IS. I mean your online billing application or your customer portal, something like that. The FactFinder is a tool for mapping that and monitoring it and showing all your connections from end to end. As you can see some example customers down here, we tend to work with large companies with complicated, heterogeneous environments. This is a sampling of some of ours. The one that's most interesting maybe to you guys is you see Microsoft there. So we are a partner with Microsoft, but they're also, Microsoft IT is a customer of ours. So they, in fact, they're one of our largest customers now. They have us deployed on over 35,000 servers now. So anyway, I'm going to walk through a few slides, by the way, and then I'm going to show you the actual product, NACA Live demo. Just bear with a few slides for me. All right, so let's talk about the issues you have with migration. So to me, the hardest thing is that initial figuring out what you have. So oftentimes, if you have to plan out, what servers do you have, what applications are running across them, who's talking to whom, that initial the mapping process can take several man-months to figure out what you have. It obviously depends on the size and complexity of your environment. Especially if you're talking about a 2003 migration. These are old servers, old applications that have been out there for a long time. So then once you have an idea of who's talking to whom and what's out there, it's very important to be able to identify what are the key servers, which ones you need to make sure you move carefully, or which groups of servers need to go together. Or similarly, are there servers that can be decommissioned possibly, or consolidated, or do you have maybe some over-provisioned or under-provisioned VMs? These are all things you can take care of with that migration. The third bullet here is the issue of if you're going from 2003, or really any platform, and you're going to migrate to newer OSs, or especially if you're going to go into a public or private cloud, the tools you have to manage your environment now, are they still going to work in that new environment? And if not, then that needs to be part of your migration planning as well. So lastly, Paul talked a bit about saving costs of migration. That's true. That's one of the main reasons people do this. Obviously, one is to get the upgraded OS and updated security issues, but also just to have lower costs. But you can blow the whole ROI of this migration if that initial migration planning costs too much. So the key is you want to make sure you can do this all cheaply. Let's talk about the steps that as we see in the Blue Stripe and how FactFinder can help you with these steps. So really that first step of migration, as I talked about, is that initial discovery. What servers do you have? What applications are on those servers? What are the dependencies? Second step is once you have that map, assessing it. So this is where you put together your plan of what are the key applications. If you're going to move an application, one application at a time, which servers are part of that, or which servers need to go together so you don't break multiple apps at one time. And it's also where you can then identify any underutilized or overutilized servers, or deal with any errors you have. Maybe there are failed connections in your current environment that you want to make sure you take care of before you migrate. So the third step is the actual move. Now, FactFinder is not a tool to help you with the move. Obviously, AppZero, you'll hear about a little bit later, is a great tool for that. What that in this new environment, whether it's in the cloud or if it's all on-prem or more likely a hybrid of the two, that she can manage these applications the same as she could before. All right, so we're almost to the demo here, but this is a sample of what FactFinder is going to show you. This is a sample application. And again, FactFinder builds them out with this automatically. So it builds this map without you telling you ahead of time what applications are out there, what connections are out there. And again, I will show you this. So there are other ways to get data out of FactFinder, by the way. So I saw that map. We have a console. But we also have a number of ways to extract data. So this is a sample server report showing you in a spreadsheet. We can dump data out to CSV files, read in a spreadsheet. We have a tool to read data out to a database. We also have a REST API, where as you can see here, we can return data in JSON format. So if you have some developers who want to pull out structured information about your servers, or in this case, the network connections, you can read that into any number of tools, whether it's out to a CSV again, or to a database, or some other tools you have. All right, so that's it for my slides. Now I'll get some more juicy product demo. Okay, hopefully you guys can still see this. All right, this is my FactFinder console. So, and I guess talk about the architecture a little bit. So FactFinder is an agent-based tool. So we have an agent that we call the collector. So when you hear me say collector, that's our agent. You deploy it out to the key servers you're interested in, and the collector then sees all the processes on those servers, and then all the connections in, so all the TCP activities, basically connections coming in, connections going out. And from there, our central management server, that's the other part of the architecture. So we have collectors you deploy out to your servers. They all talk to the management server, and it can build a map like you see here. So this is an overview that basically shows your network as a whole. And this is my demo environment. So what we have here, we have 16 collectors deployed, and those 16 collectors are aware of 50 total machines right now. And that's because FactFinder can see not only the 16 collectors, 16 machines where the collectors are deployed, but all the servers they're talking to, everything up to one hop away. All right, so once FactFinder has built this map of connections, and by the way, you will see it move around. These are real servers doing real things, so it does redraw. The FactFinder will then go through and discover applications, and that's what you see in the upper left here. Right now, it's like I have 18 applications discovered. This one here is this online claims processing. See over on the right, there are 7 servers in this map. So out of those 50 servers that FactFinder knows about, this application just uses these 7 servers. Corporate ERP system application is made up of 5 servers. The CRM app is 2. CSI app is 7, and so on. Every application, different shape, different size, all based on the actual dependencies that make up that application. Now I'm going to double-click this one to get some more detail. All right, so here is this online claims processing application. Let me go one notch higher here. So now you can see not just the server-to-server dependencies, but actually start to get to the process level. So just to show you what you're seeing here, so each of these gray boxes represents a server or an OS. And the key to understand is that FactFinder built this map automatically. So I didn't have to tell FactFinder this application existed, or say this server was in, these servers are not in. FactFinder built that automatically based on the actual connections, the actual data that's flowing through these servers. The only thing we did do to customize it is I put these yellow labels on the servers to give sort of clearer names, and then also the name of the app, which is Azure App : That's where I added that to the front of the app to sort of clarify what you can see here. Is that the front end of this application is actually out in Azure. These 2 IIS nodes are Azure Cloud Services, set up with 2 instances. I have SQL Server here running on an Azure VM. So we're showing that FactFinder can handle platform as a service, or here infrastructure as a service. And then the other servers are mostly on premises. So this box here is an app server running Apache WebSphere. It's actually a Linux box running back at Bluestripe. Then we have Oracle here. We also have an Oracle box here running on Solaris. So FactFinder can not only look at servers in the cloud or on-prem or a hybrid, but it can also look across Windows, as these front-end boxes are, Linux, or Solaris, or we also support AIX, which I don't have in this environment. The only thing to notice real quick is these boxes are out in Azure. We can do the same thing if you're moving servers out into AWS. We have visibility in either Azure or Amazon. All right, so once FactFinder has built this map, and again, another thing to understand is traffic, this map would update automatically. See those in there. Or if a new database pops up in the back, maybe this Oracle database starts to replicate with another database, those new connections will show automatically. All right, so this is that initial step one of your mapping out of what you have. So for assessment, you can see where FactFinder, because it is an agent-based product, we know not only these connections, but also we have a lot of performance data about all these servers and processes. So you can see on the left here, this chart, this is the response time of the application as a whole. And that's basically from the two IIS to their clients. So the solid line is average response time, the dash is max response time, so basically your worst case. So we're showing you how the app's performing. See load here as well, the number of responses being handled. And then if I expand IIS here, so IIS processing group is actually made up of three processes. There's the system process, which is who binds port 80. You have online claims processing, which is your app pool. It's actually where the name of the application comes from. And then the publishing service. You'll notice there's a little chart next to each one of these processes. And you see those going back as well. So we have a little spark line next to each process, so at a glance you can kind of see how each tier is performing. Similarly, on the edges, you'll notice you have thin gray lines, then some fatter purple lines like here, and they get a little fatter here, and then maybe the fattest one is Apache pointing to WebSphere. And what that is essentially is a heat map telling you where most of the time is being spent. So the fattest line basically is your bottleneck. Doesn't mean it's wrong or it's bad. It's FactFinder is telling you right now that's where the data, the time is being spent. So just take a step back. So someone who's trying to look at this application, didn't know anything about it other than the name, could look at this real quick and see, okay, I see I have a 3-tier app. I know it's a classic web architecture, web front end, middle tier applications, back end databases. I've got a server running Docker back here. They can see the shape and all the servers that make up the application. They can also know very quickly that Apache waiting on WebSphere is my current bottleneck. So if there are any performance issues, that's where I want to start. Now I'm going to double click the server and drill down. We'll show you a bit more of the detailed data that FactFinder has.
So Dave, if I could interject here just a little bit. One of the things that we find so exciting about this is we go in all the time and we do assessments for customers. We go in and we collect the data with our agentless tools, go in and collect all the basic infrastructure information, all the information about applications. But then when the clients come and talk to us about doing the 2003 upgrade for them, then we go back to them with a lot of questions about which servers are dependent on which servers and how much data moves between the applications. And a lot of times they don't know because they've grown through acquisition or something like that happens. So putting together a credible and a low-risk migration plan without this kind of data becomes relatively difficult. But with the tool like FactFinder, we're able to see what's actually going on in the environment and make sure that we can build a migration plan that takes as much of the risk as possible out of that process. So Dave, back to you. Just wanted to throw that in.
That's a great point, and you exactly right. So FactFinder, and just to reiterate this point, it does not require someone to come in and know ahead of time how the apps are shaped. You don't have to go ask a developer and hope they still have the Visio diagram on the cube wall with the boxes and lines of how it should look, which is especially valuable for 2003, where those people who set the application up may not be around anymore. And actually, it's a good segue to this screen I was going to show here. So I'll show a little bit of this full details, but there's a box at the bottom here. You see this where it says apps this machine participates in. FactFinder has a lot of data if you want to get further and deeper into your assessments. But really the main value, especially for a migration story, is that initial mapping. And again, it's not just initial, it's actually live. So as things change, this map will change with you. And one last thing to point out before I wrap it up is that this view that you're seeing here is live, it's 10 minutes wide. The FactFinder has historical data as well. So I can go in here and I can look at, say, a previous date. I can go back to, say, March 10th and look at a window to see, to compare maybe a before and after an application, before and after migration. And FactFinder does this without having to create a database. So when you install our management server, it's a very simple installation. It doesn't require a database. It stores all this data in binary files on that server. And similarly, the collectors themselves you install on these servers, also a very simple installation. So just a few clicks or a simple silent install, and they're up and running. And basically, you can have maps like you're seeing here in certainly under an hour. As long as you have rights to install those agents, it's very simple to get this up and running. And with no configuration, you can start having data about your system very quickly.
Well, Dave, thanks. Really appreciate that. Really cool stuff, and we're gonna keep moving on now, and we'll have some time for some Q&A at the end. Okay, so we'll keep moving right along here. We've been through that part of it. Now we're moving into AppZero. AppZero really plays two roles. One is, as we talked about, they're part of our assessment process with their PACE tool. The other is they've got a really amazing tool for migrating applications from a current source to a new target. And with that, we're going to turn it over to Joey Wright from AppZero. Joey.
Hey, thanks, Joey. I'll go ahead and start here. This is Greg Sullivan with the AppZero, and I'm going to provide a quick overview at a high level prior to the demo of what AppZero does. So it's quite simple. What we do is we extract and move, really copy or clone an application from the source machine to the destination. The source machine is often a Windows 2003 box, can be a different version, but big focus right now is moving off of Windows 2003, taking that application, all the components that it needs to run services, application components, make up the application ecosystem, and deliver it to the destination environment. We'll get into exactly how that works shortly, but just on the broad picture again, the destination environment could be, there was a poll question of, who you
to migrate this application. So now I'm going to go ahead and close these applications. I'm going to leave the services running. The assumption is this application is still sitting in production. So now I'm going to switch over to a 2012 machine that I've built. So this 2012 machine is clean, except this is where I've installed my AppZero software. And these icons on the left side of the screen represent what we call our migration workbench. This is where we're actually going to conduct this migration. Now, everything I'm going to show you in the context of this migration is via a GUI, but it's actually back-ended by a command line interface. So everything we do in the context of this GUI can be scripted or automated so we can do migrations at mass, and I'll describe that or talk about that in a little bit. So this process starts with what we call our tether console. And the first thing we need to do is we need to define or create what's called a VAA, a virtual application appliance, that's going to contain the application we're migrating along with all of its dependencies from Server 2003 to this machine, this new 2012 device. So I'm going to call that VAA WordPress. So it's going to create that VAA WordPress in a directory called C Appliances. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the tether console which server I'd like to connect to and which credentials I'm going to use to connect to that server so I can actually perform a discovery against that device. So what this discovery is doing is it's going out and it's creating the add remove programs cache. So it's ultimately going to return to us a list of all the applications that are available for migration on that device. So you should see a list ultimately pop up that is somewhat familiar to you, given your specific scenario. And in the context of that list, you'll see names that appear in green, white, and red. Basically, if it's red, we don't want you messing with it. If it's green, we know you're going to have great success. If it's white, it just means we don't maintain it in our database. So I'm going to go ahead and select the application. And the notion is here, I'm not intimately familiar with WordPress, so I don't know if I need anything else. I don't know if I need the Windows Search 4.0 or any of those other objects. I'm going to have to rely on AppZero to go ahead and map its dependencies. So I'm simply going to select Bitnami WordPress stack, and I'm going to go ahead and switch to my Remote Services tab. Now, when I switch to this tab, again, we're querying the remote services that are installed on that device, but AppZero is going a couple steps further, and it's saying, okay, of these services I'm seeing, which actually belong to WordPress or one of its dependencies. And when it identifies one of those objects, it's actually going to flag those objects as dependent objects for us automatically. So I don't need to know that WordPress Apache and WordPress MySQL are dependent objects of WordPress. It's automatically going to select those for us. Now, while we're on the screen, we're also getting a warning telling us that these remote services are started and we need to stop before we continue. This basically means we're free to go on with this process and grab what we can while production services are still in place and people are actively using this machine. But in order to migrate this application in its entirety, we do need a production outage. We need a maintenance window whereby we can stop these services and grab any of those objects that might be locked by having them in production. So I'm going to stop these remote services, effectively entering that maintenance window, and I'm going to go ahead and start my tether. Now this tether is literally that pipe we're creating between Server 2003 and 2012, where we start pulling all of those assets over into this VAA called WordPress that we're creating. So as we pre-populate that VAA, we're literally grabbing the registry assets, service assets, side-by-side assemblies, etc., that this application needs to launch. Now if I browse to that VAA, the appliances WordPress. Now, I'm not going to go through this file structure in too much detail, but you'll notice that there's a C-store-C. Now, inside this directory called C-store-C, we have the file system as it's represented on the source server in the C drive. So, as an administrator or an engineer conducting this migration, this is a directory structure I'm comfortable with and I'm familiar with. The benefit of maintaining the structure this way is that I can tell at a glance which objects I'm pulling from on that source machine and how are they existing inside this VAA. And this directory is updated in real time, so you can see we have program files in a directory called Bitnami that have populated in this, and we will continue this process until such time just popped up, and I don't expect everyone to be able to see this. This is quite the eye chart. But the notion is here, these are dependencies that AppZero found that belong to this application that we're migrating. In this particular case, we've seen that the Visual C 9.0 dependencies required to make this application function. Certain policy objects from the Visual C 9.0 runtime are required to make this object function. So what we're doing behind the scenes is AppZero is taking care of grabbing those dependencies that once required intimate knowledge about the application for us on our behalf. So we'll continue populating those objects in the side-by-side components directory as well. Now the last directory I'd like to talk about is what we call tether. Now I mentioned earlier that everything I'm showing you within the context of the GUI is actually powered via command line. And that command line utility we use or leverage for this is called PACE, Predictive Application Component Extraction. And what PACE does is it takes as an argument all that information we entered into that tether console, the name of the server and the name of the credentials we're going to use to connect to that server. Once we give PACE that information, it actually creates a directory with the name of that server, and inside that directory we have a couple files that are relevant to us. We have a machine info file that gives us the version of the operating system, but most importantly we have this products list. Now this products list file is literally everything we saw when we hit that Find Applications button and performed that initial discovery. This is that applications list where we select which applications we'd like to migrate before we go on with the tethering process. So we can do everything up until this point via command line, select our applications, and then allow PACE to continue in the background via command line to migrate that application until that tether is actually finished. But what's great about PACE is this tether credentials file. Right now it contains one entry because that's the way we're processing this activity via the tether console, but this application could very easily contain several different instances of servers. There could be a dozen instances here. There could be 100 different servers here. As you can see, we can start very easily creating migration processes to automate migration at scale if we need to. So behind the scenes, as this continues copying, we should ultimately get to the point where information is populated into the VAA. Services are going to be registered on the local VAA, and what's going to happen is we're going to be able to start all those services that were once existing on the remote device on the local device as virtual assets, meaning we're not going to physically alter the local machine short of taking up hard drive space while we're migrating. But we can instantiate these services, we can manage these services, start and stop them, etc. We can control the context if they need service accounts, etc. We can manage all of that just as we would a physical application, but those services are going to be now virtual. So once we start this VAA, you'll notice that the Remote Services tab now changes to a Local Services tab, and I'll now have WordPress Apache and WordPress MySQL in my Local Services console if I were to go there. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to go ahead and start these services. Now when I start these services, the understanding is that AppZero might not have everything it needs to run inside that VAA yet. So it will actively go across that tether and start bringing things across the wire as it needs to. So to illustrate this, down here in the system tray, we actually have what's called a tether monitor, and that tether monitor will change to an animated icon when we're bringing objects across that tether. We even have what's called a tether log, a live tether log, and that tether log will actually show you what we're bringing or what we're doing with that tether connection. Are we bringing registry entries? Are we renaming files to account for new source names, new host names on the destination, etc.? Are we copying files? Until such point where we're done, the service in this case is started, and we can continue on and start MySQL. So we can see at a very granular level what's actually going cursory functionality, we can be fairly confident that this application is ready to send off for user testing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to assume for purposes of this demonstration that this application has migrated successfully, at least inside the virtual state. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to go ahead and close everything down and finish this tether operation. Now when we finish this tether operation, we're going to undock this VAA. Docking and undocking is a binary process. You're turning the virtual application off, or you're turning that virtual application on. Once we turn that application off, all those virtual services that were existing and the memory resident objects for that application, they're now gone. The only footprint we have on this device, the only modifications we've done to this device, are the file structures that are contained within that C Appliances WordPress folder. Now, after we've done that initial migration, we can now manage this application. And what I mean by manage this application is we can go in to what we call an administrative console, and we can elect to go ahead and dock this application again and allow people to use it in its docked state. We can even manage that tether. So if you recall, the tether was that connection we're making actively to that source machine, that 2003 device. If I don't want to leverage that tether any longer, maybe that machine's in production, maybe the machine's gone, I can go ahead and break that tether. Another interesting feature of managing this tether is I have the ability to synchronize data. Maybe we migrated WordPress 2 months ago and we're just now getting to the point where we want to go ahead and start testing this for production cutover. I can go ahead and start this application with the tether in place and choose to update all my data based on how the source server exists today, rather than having to go through and rebuild or conduct the entire migration over again. So rather than suffer you through seeing this application run in its virtual environment again, what I'd like to do is I'd like to make WordPress a physical component of the local operating system. In other words, I want to remove AppZero from the equation. I want to manage and monitor this application as I'm used to, which means it needs to be a physical component of the operating system. So I'm just going to go to Programs and Features right now just to show you that I don't have any WordPress entries in there as of yet. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a command line utility. And in order to remove AppZero from the equation in this case, we need to dissolve that virtual application appliance to the local operating system. And to do that, we have a command line utility called AppZero Dissolve that takes as an argument the name and location of the VAA we want to process. And what we're going to do here is we're going to process that VAA. We're going to lay down the file objects that you saw in that Steve store folder. We're going to merge the registry entries from the virtual appliance into the local registry. We're going to register all those side-by-side assemblies. Ultimately, what's going to happen is we're going to tell you whether or not we succeeded in this, and we're going to tell you at a high level how many objects we actually processed.
Hey Joey, we're a little bit tight on time here, so I'm wondering, I know that dissolve is the final step in the process. What I'd like to do is move forward and maybe have you make your closing comments as we transition to the next presentation. Can we do that?
Sure. So the application now functions as a component of the underlying operating system. It's managed as a component of the underlying operating system. So you could, in fact, uninstall AppZero, move forward, and this application is now migrated from one machine to the other. Having said that, I'll pass it back to Paul, and he can go.
Okay.
Thank you, Joey. Real quickly, we have a big agenda here today. So just moving forward, so we've seen the initial assessment. We talked about that a little bit. We saw how to get your server-to-server dependencies. Now we see how to analyze an application and get all those dependencies. Now we're going to go have Aprenda do their presentation, which will allow you to be able to see the, we're having a little technical difficulty on this end, will allow you to see how these applications can be moved to a PaaS environment when that's appropriate. So with that, we will make Eric Lustgarten the presenter.
Okay.
And Eric, it's coming your way here in just 1 second.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul. I just got it.
Okay.
Let me go ahead. Okay, perfect. So sorry about that. So
separation altogether from the underlying infrastructure. What happens is the Apprenda path would become that target infrastructure where your applications would be migrated to, decoupling yourself from any future OS instance, because that becomes then the responsibility of the path. And to get a little bit into greater detail exactly what Apprenda is we're a software layer, a private platform as a service that runs on top of your infrastructure of choice, and that can be bare metal, virtualized infrastructure, public or private. As long as you give us Windows and Linux images or OS instances, we stitch that together into an application hosting container that essentially decouples applications from the underlying infrastructure, giving developers that self-service capability to push applications. We do that in a compliant and policy managed way, and hopefully I'll have a little bit of time to go through a few of those. But the value proposition there becomes that by applications being totally abstracted away from the underlying infrastructure, the whole underlying server version it becomes non-existent essentially. Applications are not tied to them anymore, and the path is in charge of injecting whatever dependencies or configurations are required to actually be able to facilitate an application running on top of it. We have a very good relationship with Microsoft as well, and with the other companies that have presented today. And our whole value proposition for this migration as well is we have a private platform as a service software, and again can run within your private and public infrastructure, creating and giving you that hybrid cloud strategy that a lot of companies are starting to think about. So for the demonstration, really there's two main constituents here that get to use the platform and that are affected by the migrations, and part of what Apprenda does, right, from the role of the developer, these applications that are existing applications running on old infrastructure, most of them, as Paul mentioned before, there was no cloud when 2003 was around. So these applications are not written in a modern way. They're not cloud applications. They're not load balanced. They're not highly available. So developers need a way to modernize their application without actually having to rewrite the app. From an IT professional's point of view, what they want is they want to make the migration process as easy as possible, but they also want to future-proof their infrastructure so end-of-life issues don't become an issue again. So when 2008 has its end of life, you don't have to go through this whole cycle again. If you have your applications running on Apprenda, you simply take those 2008 servers out of the mix, and the platform is smart enough to move applications around without any downtime and reconfigure them on the fly for whatever new mix of servers you happen to have underneath. And that's what you see here on the box on the right. Because we're almost out of time, actually, it's already 3 p.m. I won't actually do the demonstration today. I know, Paul, we have questions open from the folks that attended the webinar. So what I'll do is I'll leave it open for the questions. From the Apprenda side, we're more than happy if private path, hybrid cloud, or any cloud modernization strategies, if you're undergoing any of those, please feel free to reach out to the Apprenda team, and we'll be happy to set up a demo with a deeper dive of our technology as well.
Well, thank you, Eric, and I apologize to everyone for running a little bit long, but if you could bear with us for just a couple more minutes, we're almost there. Just to summarize a little bit, I know that it's a lot of value that Apprenda can bring, but one of the reasons we wanted to bring it today is if you can just imagine taking all those operating system images and potentially running multiple applications in the Apprenda platform on top of each of those operating system images. That's really one of the main things, at least regarding 2003 directly, that Apprenda brings, is that ability to essentially, I'm abusing the term a little bit, but make the operating system the hypervisor. So very interesting stuff. So we're going to run through the rest of it here relatively quickly. We've already done the Apprenda part of it. So kind of wrapping up here today a little bit. We've taken you through a process here where we do an initial assessment with agentless tools. And then very often we need the clients need more data and more support to be able to put together a migration plan and a migration project. So that's where we bring Blue Stripe initially into the process, and this is something Champion can put together and manage the entire thing for you. We kick this off with a funded assessment that includes, and this is funded in partnership with Microsoft, to collect all of the data on your servers, the hardware, OS, and application data, performance utilization data, the applications and complexities as we showed with you earlier on, and then we can begin to do some additional add-ons to that, that with a detailed engineering analysis helping you design your platform, whether that be an on-prem, hybrid, or cloud. We can help with design consultation, and we can migrate these as well using all of the tools that you've seen here presented today, and even potentially onto the Apprenda platform. I won't bother to show these reports again, but suffice it to say this is just a small summary of the reports that you get as an output of the assessments, and really just emphasize the wrap-up now. So you know, this is a historic moment in IT. No other version of Windows Server has ever been deployed in the mission-critical status that 2003 has. So this is really kind of a first time, maybe in the history of IT, certainly in the history of Windows servers, that there's this big of a migration. There's a lot of opportunity in the path. As you can see, there are a lot of great tools out there to get this done. Champion certainly brings all of these tools together into one cohesive process and program for you. We've got a Microsoft-funded assessment that helps you get started, see what you've got, and helps you begin your way down this process to an optimized target design. And we appreciate your time today. Joey, I know you were a little rushed at the end. Anything you would like to add to your presentation from AppZero?
Nothing I'd specifically like to add to the presentation, but we are definitely available to talk in depth, either through Champion or directly, reaching out to info@appzero.com.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and Eric, likewise to you. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I do want to thank everyone for attending, and if you are interested in listening or hearing more about Apprenda, we're more than happy to send up any additional documentation on why companies are using private paths as a way to modernize their applications and future-proof their infrastructure. Again, you can reach out through Champion or Apprenda.com, and we can reach back out and send you some of our webinars or demonstrations.
Great, and Dave Irwin, I know we talked a lot about the assessment and the discovery process as well, but I know your offering is also a quote-unquote leave behind, right, where it can monitor the environment on an ongoing basis. So you want to make any quick comments on that?
That's right. So FactFinder is a great tool for that initial assessment, but it really is, you know, it's built initially as an ongoing monitoring tool. So that's the point we talked about for migration, is that, you know, once you've done your migration and validation, if you've got FactFinder installed, you know, it's already there ready to go for longer-term migration, monitoring. And we're happy to talk to you more about that. You can go through Champion, like the other guys, or visit us at bluestripe.com.
Well, thank you, and well, thank you to everyone that joined. You know, we have a very comprehensive program. As you can see, it addresses all of the risks associated with this migration as we move through it. So we can help you get started with the assessment and help you with all of the rest of the facets of planning and designing and executing your migration strategy. So we hope that this has been interesting for you today, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future. Thank you.
And that does conclude today's program. We'd like to thank you for your participation. Have a wonderful day, and you may disconnect.